It's time for a check. Good morning, everyone from around the world watching us live on Channels Television. So let's start first with our global week expectation. And starting just as we're speaking now, China has released its unemployment data report, which shows that the economic report is showing that there's an increase there. If you can take a look at it on the screen there, China's unemployment data has just been released, and then we don't have that figure at the moment. So just move straight up to the expectation for Tuesday. Europe's international trading goods balance report is expected to be released on Tuesday, and the unemployment rate is expected to flow to about 5.4%, up from is expected to slow to 5.2%, down from 5.4%. So at the same time, the European Union Statistical Office is expecting that that figure is coming at the time that the global economy is facing the impact of the Iran war, which has really dampened a lot of economic prospects there. So then for Wednesday, we're expecting that the UK's April Consumer Prices Index report will be released, and that's expected to be released on May the 19th at about early part of the day there. And then on Thursday, we have the US flash PMI report, which will be released by the country's Department of Labor. So that report is also expected to shape what's going on around the world, around the world's biggest economy on Thursday. And then for Friday, two reports are expected to be released, which is the GDP, the quarter-on-quarter GDP report, as well as the Consumer Climate Report, which will be released from one of the world's biggest economy, which we'll talk about Germany there. So that's for Friday. So that's a wrap for what we expect for the week, the third week of the month of May for the global economy. Now let's move over to what's happening around the world right now. First of all, starting with today, we're having the G7 finance ministers, which include the likes of UK, the US, Japan, Germany, France, and two others there. So they'll be meeting today and tomorrow to assess, one, the impact of the Iran war on their economies as well as the global economy. So the issues of trade tariffs as well as geopolitical impacts on energy. So the G7's core members, which includes US, UK, Canada, France, Germany, and Italy, as well as Japan, they'll be they'll be having that meeting. So a senior European official says the situation in the Middle East has highlighted how exposed the interconnected global economy is to the external shocks caused by many factors there. So that's it for what to expect for the news at the moment. And now, at the same time, we're also having that the European markets, as well as Asian markets, they all fell after US President Donald Trump, he's in the news again, still on the Iran war. Just last week, he had the meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. They talked about quite a lot of issues there, from trade to the issues of the Iran war, as well as also some deals. But that meeting wasn't all that productive, but we'll be having our guest to speak on that. If we can have him now, let's talk to Julian Karagwesian, who is a macro expert. So he'll be giving us more details about that. So thank you for joining us, Mr. Julian Karagwesian.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so now let's start first. President Donald Trump's visit to China comes at a time of renewed tariff tensions and global economic uncertainty. What were the biggest economic wins or missed opportunities from the Trump-Xi meeting from an international perspective?
Well, it's not clear that they were going for an economic win. They weren't totally clear about their objectives. One thing that I think the Trump administration wanted with the visit was to communicate to the Chinese. They want to make sure, the Trump administration, that they don't have a third front. So they're deeply involved in the Ukraine-Russia war, the NATO-Russia war. They're bogged down deeply in the war against Iran that they've conducted with Israel. And I think it was a type of a meeting, if I can say it informally like this. We're not going to be doing anything in East Asia. We hope you're not doing anything in East Asia. Let's have an entente. Let's keep things as they are, and maybe we can progress on certain limited agreements on Boeing aircraft, on soy, on beef. And the Chinese obviously want the tariffs to come down in the U.S., although China's shown a lot of resilience to the U.S. trade war.
Okay, Julian, so now that takes me to my next question with you. One major outcome of the visit was China's commitment to increase purchases of U.S. agricultural products and discussions around easing trade barriers. Do these agreements signal a genuine thaw in U.S.-China economic relations, or are they more of a temporary strategic truce?
I think it's more of a temporary strategic truce. I think this was more, a visit of the Americans, of the U.S. administration, going to China in a more weakened position. Obviously, the United States is still extremely powerful, but they're in a more weakened position than when President Trump first visited in 2017, which was also the last visit of a U.S. president. So they're in a more weakened position. We've seen, I think, some of the limits of global U.S. military power as they've faced quite a wall in Iran. So there's a stalemate in Persia, and I think there was a couple of things that there is an agreement in principle to buy more U.S. oil, to buy more U.S. Agricultural products, a possible deal on 200 737 Boeing Max. However, there are these big issues outstanding, geopolitical ones. I think the Americans, President Trump, wanted Chinese to put more pressure on Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz. And obviously, President Xi Jinping wanted assurances that the U.S. wouldn't continue to meddle in what they see as affairs very close to their home. So we have some kind of initial progress, but it's really going to depend on geopolitical factors, whether the United States continues to arm Taiwan, and whether the Americans can get the Chinese to pressure Iran, which I think they've done. I think the Chinese have pressured both sides. I think they've put pressure on Iran to accept some of the American demands. And I think the Chinese are also pressuring quietly the Americans on this, because I think it's important to remember, and yet it's important to remember that the Strait of Hormuz was open on February 27th. And now it's closed after the attack. And there is, from the Chinese point of view, from the global point of view, there is a quick solution to this problem, which continues to grow every day.
Okay, so now, Julian, so now let's wrap it up with this final question. Now, beyond trade issues like Taiwan technology competition and China dominance, which is continuing to shape the relationship between both countries, how should global markets and emerging economies like Nigeria interpret the broader geopolitical implications of this engagement between the two countries? Just in 20 seconds.
Well, I think at one level, it's positive that both countries and both countries' leaders are sitting down and talking. Talking is good. It's better than conflict. And so there's a follow-up visit from President Xi to the White House, I think on September 24th. So that's good. And we'll just have to see if progress continues to be made. But diplomacy and talking is always better than conflict and everything that comes with conflict.
Okay, so thank you so much, Julian.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. Okay, so that's global news for Monday. We'll see you tomorrow.